Encounter is brought to you by the Broome County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community. Connect and inspire. Encounter the Broome County Council of Churches.
Hello, I'm Jeff Kellam, and I flossed today, therefore I get to be the host. And my guest is the Reverend Mr., or perhaps Reverend Doctor?
You can do that.
Reverend Dr. Joseph Sellepack. Recently, on a trip to New York City, my wife and I went to the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. And if you've ever been to St. Patrick's in New York or the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, you walk inside and the awe is just inspiring deep things within you just to see the stained glass. But your eyes are almost immediately drawn up to the vaulted ceilings. And of course, when these cathedrals were designed, they were designed to draw you up, because that's kind of the direction where God was found. Not so much anymore. As we build new worship spaces, first of all, we don't have the money to build the cathedrals that we did then. But we're seeing more God with us, God among us. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. A new book by Diana Butler Bass called Grounded. And pardon me while I check the subtitle, Finding God in the World, a Spiritual Revolution. Diana Butler Bass, a prolific writer. She's not quite one who's never had an unpublished thought, but she writes a great deal. The Christianity After Religion is another of her books, and that's the one that's kind of on the title of the book here. And Joe, you read this book and you were quite taken by it. Let's talk about what led you to do your book report for today on the Encounter program.
Well, actually, when I was every winter, I go to winter pastor school in Stetson University in Florida, and everyone says, "Well, yeah, you're escaping the New York winter by going there," but
sure.
It is continuing ed, and I got to meet Diana Butler Bass. She was one of the presenters at the pastor school, and she spent a lot of time talking about the book, enough so that I thought it was worth reading. What she did before she even talked about the book itself was to go through some of the demographic shifts that are happening within the world around us. So the Christianity After Religion, and some of the studies from like the Pew Charitable Trust and other places where they're talking about the place of religion within the world in general, and how religious institutions or even denominations or organized religion is taking extreme hits in both Europe and in North America, with the rise of what they call the religious nuns, N-O-N-E-S,
yeah.
nuns,
right.
Who are spiritual, but they're not necessarily religious. They don't have a community of faith that they relate to.
When they check into the hospital and they're asked to check a box that says, "What is your religious tradition or faith?" None is what would be checked.
Is exactly, yeah. And so they don't want to have a priest or a minister come to them. They're more agnostic as far as the larger questions, but they are spiritual in the fact that they see God in the world, and so she went on in her lectures from talking about all the demographic shifts to going into the book and where the book fits into her understanding of that shift,
yeah.
and what would speak to, so to speak, what would speak to the people who she considers to be religious nuns,
yeah.
the N-O-N-E-S again.
Right.
And especially given the fact that this demographic is between the ages of 16 and 35, which is the big demographic that every advertiser is kind of looking at, because they know that those people have expendable money and they're looking to figure out how to use it. And so if you're wanting to look at a large swath of humanity and try to figure out, well, where are we headed, that 16 to 35 age group kind of shows us what's happening in our world. And that age group, the way that they experience God is largely through nature. She goes through a whole slew of data that proves that it's that nature and God and how we understand God are kind of together in a certain way. And so,
well, about the first third of the book is almost a theology of our environment.
Right.
It is based in soil, which is the grounded part where I think she begins her thesis. So you go through the soil, and then she talks about water and the power of water as a healing force. She talks about going and sitting by the Potomac River where she lives and finding that it's calming. And then she talks about water and all the religious traditions and rituals. And then she moves into air, space above us, and the blanket of stars. So that first part of the book is acknowledging that God being found in nature, not as pantheism,
right?
So that this rock is God and that water's God, but it's more panentheism, which is God is what with all of creation and all of nature.
And it's not necessarily that God is equated with nature, but that God is so close to it that to discern where God ends and nature begins is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And it's for that reason that she would say that soil needs to be conserved. She goes through a big part of that chapter is on how we've ruined the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Or that all kinds of soil is ending up inside the Mississippi River basin, or erosion is happening at a large scale, and acres of topsoil are being lost, and that topsoil is so full of.
That's the ground of life. That's where our crops come from.
That's where everything comes from, and so then we rely on pesticides and on fertilizer in order to raise quality food.
Sure.
But then there's a trade-off that happens in the midst of that, where the amphibians end up with only having 3 legs, or they have 2 heads, or there's weird things that happen to frogs, and then the question is, well, what is it doing to humans? Mm-hmm. Are we causing disease by our over fertilizing of things within our own ground.
And then she puts the conservation spin on it by telling us that we need to change in order to. She talks about gardens.
Right.
I was thinking of Chow gardens, church gardens when she got into the actually salvation of the soil.
And in her lecture, she says the number one thing a church can do to appeal to a 16 to 35-year-old person is plant a garden.
Yeah.
And then she there's even churches that are springing up in California where they don't have the same weather that we have here in New York, that are outside all the time.
The church is the garden.
The church is the garden, and the garden
is the church.
Is the church, and they may have a gazebo where people will have Sunday school or do other kinds of things, but that area has become the church.
Yeah.
And
so that's the redemption of the soil, and then she moves into water.
Right.
And that's easy to see with all of the biblical images of water from the very beginning, when pretty much it's God and water, and then to the end of the book of Revelation, where this river flows from the throne of God. And then she talks again about the pollution of the seas and the need for us to to take water far more seriously and to take better care of it. And then she moves again into the churches. I think the Synod of Living Waters in the Presbyterian Church USA has, their mission is living waters for the world. And so churches can, with not very much money, a church could build a well that creates the water source for a community in an African nation that's never seen clean water before. So the church now is, again, participating in the...
And you even see Rotary clubs, participating in that too. The Rotary Club in Endwell, for instance, is their big push is these wells that they build in Haiti and in the developing world in order for people to experience clean water. And from Diana Butler Bass's thing is that there are gallons and gallons, millions of gallons of water that is becoming unusable, unpotable. Because of our practices again. The spirituality of the three-tiered universe that she kind of points toward, where heaven is above us, the earth is here, and hell below us, has kind of created a dichotomy between humanity and the earth, where we're only here for a certain amount of time, and we don't have to care for the earth because eventually we're going to end up in heaven, or we're going to end up in and other kinds of things like that. So for her, that three-tiered universe is kind of caught up in her entire argument about the first part of the book. So by taking care, by flattening that, by saying that God is with us, that you can find God in soil, you can find God in water. Water takes on a religious significance. It becomes part of our understanding of God. And I think that's kind of an interesting idea, especially given the fact that we, within our world, we treat water as if I don't know about you. I mean, you turn on the spigot and it just comes out. You know.
Sure.
We don't treat it with very much significance. We'll get into a critique of the book in a little while.
Yeah. But so then she does the same thing with the sky and air, the air that we breathe. And all of this, as she moves through these various pieces, and she does give short shrift to fire, from the time of Earth, Wind, and Fire, but as she moves through all of these, there is a sense that we are, the veil between sacred and secular gets thinner and thinner, to the point where you don't have to go to church anymore to encounter the sacred or God. Now just God is everywhere. And that's not a bad thing for us to think about, that God is no longer up or out, but now here. And not even within, I feel God inside. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that part, but finding God all around us, and that our existence is grounded in the God who surrounds us and is everywhere. Is that where she's headed?
In some ways. What she would say, though, is that the place of the church is very similar to the place of the shaman or the wise person. Because the earth requires poetry, or the soil requires poetry and respect. So to see the thou-ness of soil, the God that's wanting to be with soil, it requires you to be able to interpret it. And what's missing in our world today are interpreters, people who can see the meaning in the soil. So it's not just about the soil. It's
the Wendell Berries of the world.
The Wendell Berries, the poets, the folks who really get the cycles of nature and how we participate within the drama of creation. And for you to be able to see that, it requires interpreters. And for her, I think, that the church has that role. It can be a place where people can learn to interpret their lives in that kind of a way. And that kind of leads toward the second part of the book, where she shifts from this understanding of the earth and how the earth is God is with the earth, into the second part of the book, where she talks about human communities and roots and the importance of home.
Mm-hmm.
These become for her an extension of that, because humans try to co-create, in her words, with God. And that came from Matthew Fox. She talks about original blessing in the introductory part of the second half, and then goes to talk about the human creations of home and neighbors and the commons. What are these various things become part of God too. God is with them. Mm-hmm. And if you were to ask me about my earliest experiences of God, it would be in family. Family was very important to my growing up.
Just to remind everyone that we're talking about a book by Diana Butler Bass called Grounded, Finding God in the World. And again, kind of stepping away from the ancient three-storied universe where God is up there, to thinking more about God being with us. And going back to this idea now of family, and I think many of us find our rootedness in solid families. Not everyone can look back and say that,
right.
But I think my father was probably, he wasn't a nun, N-O-N-E, but he was not an institutional person. So I was not raised in the typical Christian family. I think I was raised in a Christian family. We were part of a church, but kind of on the fringes. And that it was, I'm the one that caught the flame. When my dad took me to Sunday school in 5th grade, walked me up the steps of the church, and then turned me loose, I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I was just in, count me in. And I think when I went into the ministry, I think certainly my father